In Magic the Gathering, there exists a powerful mage whose power extends beyond just space and into the realm of time itself. You know him, you love to play him, and you hate to see him opposite of you on the table. He's a man that dominates time itself, but is forced to live outside of it, suffering every great mistake he's ever made. Today, I want to talk about the great and powerful Teferi Akosa. He's that annoying blue and white wizard that controls you and keeps you from pulling off that one move you've just been planning for the last 5 minutes. However, despite how much I dislike having to play against him, something I've recently learned is that Teferi isn't just one of the most powerful mages in all of Magic history, he's one of its deepest, saddest, and actually most tragically hopeless characters, despite, yes, his insane magical prowess. Because it turns out that all the time in the world doesn't actually matter when you step to godlike forces. Now, just from a game standpoint alone, he's got plenty of cards that do showcase us this displaced time traveler, and I find pretty much all of them very interesting and intriguing. And I think one of the great parts of Magic is that we get to constantly see Teferi evolve with every chapter of his own life. In his youth, Teferi, Mage of Zhalfir, we can see that he's a young 6-foot-tall, dark-skinned man with unbelievable power, the power of time. His robes symbolize the mana color blue, and as he grows up, we do see him in the cards the Hero of Dominaria and Temporal Pilgrim. We do actually see that he gains that splash of white mana too as he gets older. He grows more wise, and you can kind of see that his life, his duty, and his glorious purpose overall has taken a real toll on him. Such, as you know, is the burden of power.
That the greatest magic of all is chronomancy, the magic of time.
If you haven't gathered, he's an epic time wizard whose mana values are blue and white. I think we've established this. Colors that typically should embody control, intellect, knowledge, order, law, and also selflessness. And you'll actually get to see why that splash of white actually took a little bit of a while to happen for Teferi as I break down his incredible tale. Long before he was ever known as the wise sage that we know today, Teferi was a perfect example of most Magic the Gathering players that you really don't like. He was a gifted prodigy, overly confident, and was certain that he was the smartest person in the room at all times and made sure that everyone else hopefully knew it too and thought so as well. You know, basically just like Jeremy at Friday Night Magic. Screw you, Jeremy, by the way. Anyways, Teferi was born in Zhalfir, which was a super advanced kingdom on the continent of Jamura, located on the plane of Dominaria. And even as a very young mage, Teferi was already really gifted at busting out some insane magic, especially time magic. Which I think makes it no surprise that Urza, the world's most dangerous engineer, saw this one coming from roughly a mile away. A gift like that needed to be honed and needed to be shaped. So Big Papa Urz whisked Teferi off to the legendary Tolarian Academy. Yeah, that academy. It's sort of like magical physics Hogwarts, I guess, if it were all run by a mad scientist in a nutshell. All the students there were absolute geniuses, and amongst their ranks were some other really legendary figures you probably know, like Joyra, Baron, and my man, Karn. Go Karn! We all love Karn, I hope, right?
It's Karn!
As you can imagine, an arrogant chronomancer surrounded by geniuses was a little bit of a bad idea. This environment attracted a Phyrexian assassin who slayed Teferi and Joyra, but luckily Karn traveled back in time to prevent this assassination, and in doing so the timeline got super messed up and created the so-called temporal accident, the event that changed Teferi's life forever. Essentially what happened is that time got all quangled up and Teferi was trapped in stasis, frozen outside of time itself. He kind of went into full sleep paralysis mode, but on steroids. He remained aware of what was occurring, but was now unable to move, speak, or even interact with anything. A torture of time itself for many, many years. Now, when he finally broke free, everything about the young man had completely changed. His arrogance was tempered, he was less rowdy, and he realized the immense weight that rested on his shoulders as a time mage. Eventually, sometime later, he then left the academy and made his way home to Jamura, a changed man this time. However, instead of a warm welcome home, Teferi found Zhalfir caught in the chaos of the Mirage War. Now, Zhalfir itself is a major kingdom on the continent of Jamura, as you can see on the map here, but there were many factions to it that actually caused a lot of issues. And as such, some massive conflict born of magical deception, politics, and general unrest consumed all the nations of this continent. Now, had it been a young Teferi who came across this scene, I'm pretty sure the dude would have just dipped like this, right? He really had no stakes in the game outside his own family. But now, having had all that time cooking up in the temporal crockpot made him really grow, and at this point in his life, Teferi had now become a protector. So, you know what he did? He intervened, using his clever tricks and time bending to turn the tides of the battle. In the process, he grew in power, experimenting with the limits of his time magic itself and the concept of phasing things, people, and places in and out of time. And once again, as you will see, in classic Teferi fashion, something once again went horribly wrong. Well, actually not exactly, because a big error did occur in his trials, but it actually turned out pretty awesome for him. Teferi's power surged, his mind got enlightened, and he had finally awoken his Planeswalker spark and became a master of the multiverse. By the way, apparently that's just how Magic the Gathering works. Sometimes people just ignite the power to roam the multiverse just like that. Let me try. Did it work? I don't think so, but it did work for Teferi until things then spiraled faster than me when my girlfriend sends me a very cryptic text once again. What does okay mean? Teferi could do quite a lot with his magic, but he couldn't change human nature itself. For you see, people are much more corrupt than his time bending ever was, so Teferi roamed the planes and in his magical exploration, corrupted the entire time stream as well, actually making it so he had to focus on that messed up time stuff instead of the war itself. Eventually though, the Mirage War did end, but it leaves a really rotten taste in his mouth. Teferi starts beginning to understand that his power is a somewhat double-edged sword, a blessing and a burden at the same time, and his lack of true interference was a big mistake. So he swore to himself to challenge the next great threat that he saw, no matter the cost, and lucky for us, it's an epic fantasy setting in Magic, and there are plenty of wars to go around to. And so once the next great threat came, he wouldn't just hesitate to use his immense power anymore, no matter what. Here's the lowdown. When Teferi went to the academy, it wasn't just because he was nasty at slinging time spells. Urza was actually preparing for the eventual invasion of Dominaria. So yeah, Teferi's known that he was a tool of war this entire time too. Kinda explains some of his attitude looking back at it, because Dominaria was threatened by the wicked Phyrexians. Those are of course these living machines, biomechanical horrors, spooky metal sandworms, the whole nine hells basically. The heavens split and metal nightmares reigned as Dominaria was in real trouble, and Teferi clocked it from a mile away. And this finally prompted the hardest choice of his long but also kind of short life so far, because he channeled some very deep magic and faced the entire kingdom of Zhalfir completely out of reality itself. This Matlet here removed himself and the entire kingdom from time itself just like that. Though, I'll be honest, I kinda get it. The math is kinda mathing, and his logic was pretty sound. Like, if they weren't in the multiverse, Phyrexia could technically not reach them. Checks out, I'm all for it. However, as you can imagine, Teferi's emotional burden went absolutely through the roof. Teferi had saved everyone who mattered by also erasing them from time, so once again Teferi had become a man out of time, huh? See what I did there? However, the great Chronomancer would of course return. A century after the apocalyptic invasion of Dominaria by the Phyrexians, the goddess Corona searched here for beings just like herself, accidentally pulled Teferi back into the actual time stream. Now, turns out Teferi wasn't actually really able to help her with her goals, but during this process, he actually caught a glimpse of a healed Dominaria. The Phyrexians were defeated, life was returning, and he contemplated bringing his homeland back into the time stream now that the war was over. Or maybe that last part didn't happen. It's all a little bit clunky with the source materials. Long story short, Corona's lore during this time conflicts with the new official canon, making this part of the timeline somewhat messy. And to me at least, it seems like Wizards no longer wants Teferi out of time, so instead he wandered the planes, never even meeting Corona, is what now apparently happens. And then 300 years later, Teferi finally returned to Dominaria to prepare the return of his homeland. But it turns out Dominaria was nearly drained of all its mana at this point, and there were a bunch of really messy time rifts that had opened up as well. Luckily, he's pretty good at time magic, or at least so he thinks, and he teamed up with Radha and Venzer, some other powerful planeswalkers, and started closing Dominaria's dangerous time rifts. But unfortunately for him, he then also squared off against the Dragon God Overlord Nicol Bolas, who I made a video about and you can learn about after this video. It's linked in the description below, but anyways, Teferi had to make another great sacrifice this time, giving up his own Planeswalker Spark to close the Shivan Time Rift. A time rift that you won't believe where it is located in Shiv, the area of Jamuras that Zhalfir was actually located in originally. And since he now had no more multiversal level power, it was up to yet another hero, Jeska, to later seal the Zhalfirin Risk herself. And without Teferi's precision, his homeland was now truly lost in time, with no hope of being brought back in. And that's the point in the story where Teferi decides to become this super nomad. He had no ties to anyone anymore, having removed them all from time itself, and all that's really left was to roam, explore, and of course atone. His spark had burned out, his family was lost, and his true journey only began now. And as we see, Teferi wouldn't be alone forever. In the centuries after the Big Mending, which is the big time rift closing spree that cost him his own spark, Teferi wandered Dominaria as a mere mortal regular dude. And somewhere along the way, he met this cutie here, Subira, a woman as grounded as he was philosophical. And like all very powerful women, Subira saw through the sickening guilt and found the man at Teferi's core, which I think is some true love and one of the best romances in Magic the Gathering. So together they start building a new life, giving birth to their daughter Nyambi, and in a truly poetic turn of events, Teferi learned something all parents eventually do, that the present moment matters way more than eternal time magic and chronomancy. But of course, once again, time, his cruel mistress, was eager to rob Teferi of his happiness once again. Subira eventually passed, and Teferi, without his spark, couldn't rewind that one. Luckily though, in the aftermath, Nyambi truly grounded him spiritually, and Teferi truly grew once again as a person. Time was fickle, but he would become much more solid, like a big old rock. And then decades after his magical spark completely fizzled out, Teferi was reunited with one of his old classmates, Joira. And kind of like all these memes about the lions talking to house cats or dinosaurs talking to chickens, she helped him remember who he really was. Teferi was now once again required to defend Dominaria from a truly legendary threat, Nicol Bolas, but this time he had actually grown. He wasn't just a powerful chronomancer anymore, he was a dad, and dads go beyond. So through sheer grift and resolve, Teferi became the hero of Dominaria, reawakening his spark. Just in time also to rematch the dreaded dragon god Nicol Bolas. And that epic battle was of course known as the War of the Spark. TLDR, Nicol Bolas took over a bunch of planes and decided to take all the planeswalker sparks so he could become an uber powerful multiversal dragon god, but Teferi wasn't gonna let that one happen. So Teferi joined the Gatewatch, which is essentially the Planeswalker Justice League, and he went absolutely ham, dudes. Like, he'd fought Bolas before, but he was just a young time wizard at that point. Now he had become an older time wizard, aged like a fine wine, Teferi did. He delayed attacks, countered spells, and tackled Bolas's plans with clockwork precision. He lost comrades, he lost many, but he wouldn't lose the entire war. And in the end, Bolas was defeated, and Teferi bore witness to what his path could have been. He himself was once a man completely bent on control and saw what control could truly become, so he swore he'd never fall into that cycle ever again. And in the aftermath, Teferi kept on questing, and his journey took him somewhere very unexpected, Innistrad. Now, Innistrad, for those unaware, is a very edgy, fun, gothic plane. It has vampires, eternal nights, and a very slick fashion sense. You kind of get the idea, right? You saw some cards. Shockingly, vampires messed with the balance of day and night so they wouldn't, burn in the daylight. Who can blame them? And Teferi, the now reformed control freak, arrived here to help restore order, which is legally, I think, distinct probably from controlling order for the sake of his therapy sessions. Because remember, Teferi is now completely sworn off control. Yeah, right. Anyway, he teamed up with Arlen Court and busted out some really sick time shenanigans to literally rewind the heavens. That's, by the way, anime as hell, dude. It also gave us one of the coldest card names in my opinions, Teferi, who slows the sunset, which is just one of the coolest epithets in all of Magic. And guess what happened next? Phyrexia invaded Dominaria again. Time is a bit of a messed up cycle here. I mean, luckily Teferi has made some really good buddies over the years, and they were here to help out this time. Joira and Karn, my man, came out to help, and even his daughter Nyambi stepped up to the plate to help her papa with the greatest task here. And Teferi, of course, had one other big mission left unfinished: bring Zhalfir finally back. Redemption would be his, and to do that, he had to go back in time, back to reality. Now, in face of those stupid machine things, Teferi traveled back through time to an event called the Brothers' War, which actually was a little bit close to home since it was a battle between his mentor Urza and Urza's brother Mishra. And Teferi this time tied himself to a temporal anchor and then grabbed some popcorn and watched the Brothers' War, basically hoping to understand how to defeat the Phyrexian at their root. And the solution was an artifact known as the Golgathian Silex, the weapon that Urza used to actually end the Brothers' War. He then took his mentor Urza beyond time for a very brief moment to uncover its secrets, finding out that a person was the key to activating the weapon. However, this little time detour then messed up his time anchor, blasting Teferi off through time once again. And in a stroke of cosmic coincidence, he ended up right back where it all started, the place that he'd been trying to bring back so desperately, Zhalfir. Apparently, it was still there. The path to it was removed, but it stayed locked out of time, and only like 10 years had passed for them since Teferi had originally left them. So he didn't wait a minute and just started prepping for the Phyrexians, since through his own growth he realized that he didn't need to face them alone this time. He was confident that his allies would find him once again, which, you won't believe it, they actually did. And even crazier, a super powerful dryad named Ren merged with a super powerful tree called Realmbreaker, sick name by the way, and somehow swapped new Phyrexia with Zhalfir, leaving the Phyrexian now out of time and Teferi and Zhalfir back where they began. Time had run its course, and its master, Teferi, came out on top again after struggling to bend it to his will. And after the war, Teferi's spark began to fade as a result of the great desparking. But he doesn't fight it, he simply smiles, for his biggest mistake had finally been resolved. But there now may be need for Teferi to rise once again, since it does seem like the great dragon Nicol Bolas isn't able to be vanquished so easily, and if you want to understand what that means and why he's coming back to the story and learn about Magic's true big bad, check out this video right here, where I break down the great horned one, the god pharaoh of Amonkhet, Nicol Bolas. And if you're not subscribed to the channel, that would be much appreciated too if you enjoyed this video.